Imagine walking into what's supposed to be a courtroom where laws are made, where the nation's future gets shaped. But instead, it feels like you've just tuned into a live episode of a bad reality show. Cameras flashing, voices raised, more drama than substance. That's what Congress has turned into. Not a house of law, a stage, a set. A place where a serious job gets buried under fake outrage and performative arguments. Politicians aren't working on solutions anymore, working on sound bites. The truth is, Capitol Hill isn't running on ideas or policies right now. It's running on division. People aren't listening to each other. They're waiting for their turn to talk, or more accurately, to go viral. Hearings, which used to be about fact-finding and decision-making, have become tools for lawmakers. Don't show up to govern. They show up to perform. They don't care about solving problems. They just want to make sure their 5-minute clip gets trending. And somehow, through all this chaos, the real work that needs to happen, things like justice, fairness, safety, gets completely lost. But every now and then, someone steps into that circus and refuses to play along. Enter Jasmine Crockett. She didn't come from a political dynasty. She didn't buy her seat. She fought for it. Before Congress, she was a public defender. Someone who spent years standing up for people who had no one else. She brought that same fire to Washington, sharp, real, and grounded in actual experience. Jasmine doesn't just speak for attention. She speaks because she's lived the stories most people in that room can't even imagine. Her style is simple. Tell the truth, call out the nonsense, and never, ever stay quiet when something's wrong. And that's exactly what happened on one unforgettable afternoon. It was supposed to be another typical hearing. Cameras on, sides drawn, talking points ready. But then, Pam Bondi, former Attorney General and now a regular face on conservative media, tried to pull one of those carefully packaged attacks. She went after Crockett, expecting her to fold, to stay quiet, to keep it polite. But what happened instead was something else entirely. The moment the words left Bondi's mouth, Crockett let the mask drop. No filters, no hesitation. Just truth, raw, powerful, and impossible to ignore. That clash wasn't just a viral moment. It was a turning point. A clear line drawn in the dirt between fake politics and real leadership. Crockett didn't just respond. She flipped the whole room. And the internet didn't just watch, they felt it. Because for once, someone in power said what needed to be said, and didn't back down. Asterisk, the hearing room was packed, but it wasn't quiet. It never is during these types of sessions. The energy wasn't commit, was tight, like a stretched rubber band just waiting to snap. Cameras were everywhere, catching every eye roll, every smirk, every whispered side comment. You could almost hear the sound bites being written in real time. Each person there wasn't just thinking about what they were about to say. They were thinking about how it would play on the internet. This wasn't about justice. It was a show, and everyone was in costume. On one side of the room, Democratic members sat straight-faced, bracing themselves for whatever political attack might come next. On the other, Republicans were already loading up their lines, some barely hiding their smirks. Nobody was here to solve anything. They were here to win a moment. Pam Bondi entered the spotlight like someone who had done this before, because she had former Florida Attorney General, now a go-to voice on conservative talk shows. Bondi walked in already knowing her role. Throw shade, stir the pot, and say it with a smile. Her voice was steady. Not too loud, not too aggressive. Just firm enough to sound professional, but sharp enough that you could feel the knives underneath. She started dropping little jabs. Nothing direct, just enough to poke. She talked about law and order, about how leaders should be responsible with their words. She didn't name names at first, but the message was clear. This wasn't a debate. It was a trap. Then came the usual talking points, the ones that get used over and over again to rile people up. She brought up riots, protests, lawlessness. Always vague, always loaded. Everyone knew what she was doing. She was trying to paint a picture where anyone who challenged authority, especially someone like Jasmine Crockett, was part of the problem. She never yelled. She didn't have to. Her words were picked carefully. The kind that sound neutral on paper but are meant to light fires. Jasmine Crockett sat still as Bondi spoke. Her expression didn't change much. But the camera found her face anyway. There was a flicker of a smirk, not out of disrespect, more like someone who knows exactly what's coming. She listened. She let it build. But you could tell, just by looking at her, that she wasn't going to let it slide. She wasn't mad. Not yet. But she was paying attention. And then Bondi crossed the line. She pulled up a quote, something Crockett had said months ago, ripped out of its full context. She twisted the meaning, turning a call for peaceful protest into a supposed threat. She made it sound like Crockett was encouraging violence, like she was some kind of danger to public safety. It wasn't just a stretch, it was deliberate. And it was personal. At first, Crockett stayed calm. She spoke clearly. She corrected the quote. She laid out what she had actually said, when she said it, and why. She reminded the room that context matters, that her words weren't a call for chaos, but for accountability. She didn't shout. She didn't lose her temper. She stayed grounded, holding back more than most people could in her shoes. But Bondi didn't stop. She kept leaning in, dropping more little jabs. At first, they were vague. Then they got sharper. And the room felt it. Everyone did. The mood shifted fast. Crockett leaned forward just slightly. Her tone got tighter. No more soft explanations. Her words now came with weight. She wasn't just correcting Bondi, she was pushing back, calling out the games, pointing out how politicians twist facts just to score points. The words coming out of her mouth weren't just about defending herself, they were about calling out an entire system that lets people like Bondi twist truth into weapon. Other lawmakers started reacting. Some tried to jump in. A few backed Bondi. Others started shaking their heads. The tension had spilled beyond the two of them. It had taken over the whole room. Outside that hearing, on social media, clips were already spreading. People watching. The live stream started posting screenshots, quotes, reactions. Hashtags popped up. People weren't just watching, they were picking sides. By now, it was no longer about one quote or one conversation. It was about what this whole moment represented. A woman of color who had worked her way into a powerful seat, being challenged and framed by someone who clearly didn't respect her voice. A system where power gets used to silence, not listen. A Congress that says it wants unity, but thrives on division. And a country watching, wondering if anyone in that room actually cared about truth at all. But Crockett did. And she was just getting started. The room had been tense before, but now it felt like something was about to break. Jasmine Crockett leaned in toward her mic again, but this time, the tone had shifted completely. There was no more patience, no more calm explanations. She wasn't here to play along with anyone's script. Her voice was sharper, louder, and full of the kind of emotion that can't be faked. She started by cutting straight through the noise. You can't gaslight me. And you won't rewrite the truth on my watch. You could hear the words hit the room like a slap. She wasn't responding anymore. She was taking over. She looked directly toward Pam Bondi and began calling out exactly what was happening. This wasn't just about a disagreement. It was about a pattern, a tactic. Bondi wasn't confused. She was twisting facts on purpose. Crockett named it media manipulation. She called out the way conservative voices throw out lies, dress them up as opinions, and let them spread like wildfire on national TV. She pointed out how they love to talk about free speech until someone uses it to call them out. And that's when Crockett made it personal. This isn't about law and order. This is about control. This is about keeping people like me in check. She moved on to something deeper, something people feel every day but rarely hear in those rooms. The double standard. Crockett talked about how rich and powerful people can break the law and still get security, silence, and support. Meanwhile, regular people, especially black and brown communities, get watched, questioned, and punished for just existing. She didn't speak in vague terms. She brought up Elon Musk by name. She laid out how billionaires like him fire workers, dodge taxes, ignore rules, and somehow still get federal protection. She asked, why is he above the law while others are crushed by it? Then she made it even clearer. She said, the rest of us don't get that kind of help. The rest of us don't get guard dogs and special contracts. We get excuses. We get brushed off. And when we speak up, we get threats. Her voice got a little quieter, here but not weaker. Just more personal. She started talking about the cost of being in her seat. The threats, the messages, the fear that comes with just doing her job. You could hear it in her voice, the kind of exhaustion that builds when you know you're being targeted not for what you say, but for who you are. She wasn't crying, but she wasn't hiding the weight either. She told the room that the people fueling these attacks, people like Bondi, don't get to pretend they're keeping things safe. They're making it worse. And people are getting hurt. She brought it all back to the way law enforcement is being used not to protect the public, but to punish voices that challenge power. She said it plain. This isn't justice. This is payback, dressed up in legal terms. She talked about how the system responds differently depending on your name, your skin, or your beliefs. How some get warnings, and others get silence. How some get watched, and others get helped. This isn't random, she said. This is built in. And then, without missing a beat, she told her story. Not some perfect political speech, just the truth. She talked about the day she walked into her first job interview as a public defender. No fancy resume, no long list of credentials. Just her, she told her, soon-to-be boss. You should hire me because I'm black. He looked at her like she was joking. But she explained. She said, I can walk into that courtroom and connect in ways no one else in this office can. Not just because of how I look, but because of what I know, what I've lived. She wasn't asking for a favor. She was offering value. And when she got the job, she worked harder than anyone. For everyone. Not just people who looked like her. She turned that story into a message. That's not diversity for show. That's representation with purpose. It was quiet in the room. Not because people weren't listening, but because they couldn't look away. And then she dropped the final blow. Calm, steady, but full of fire. You don't get to weaponize your title while silencing mine. I earned this mic, and I'm using it. Silence followed. Not because there was nothing left to say, but because she had said it all. Clear, loud, and without apology. This wasn't just a defense. It was a warning, a statement. A moment that couldn't be spun or softened. Crockett didn't just survive the attacks, she flipped it. She didn't lose control. She took it. And everyone in that room and across the country felt the shift. Asterisk, after the hearing ended, the internet did what it always does. It moved fast. But this time, it didn't move past Jasmine Crockett. Her moment hit like a wave. The clip of her calling out Pam Bondi, breaking down double standards, and standing her ground started spreading across platforms within minutes. People weren't just watching, they were reacting. Some cheered, some cried, some posted their own stories in the comments. For many, it felt like someone had finally said what they'd been wanting to say for years, but never had the platform to do it. Crockett had that platform, and she used every second of it. Support came pouring in. Activists, legal experts, even everyday people who had never followed a congressional hearing before, were now sharing her speech. It wasn't about politics. It was about truth. About strength. Of course, the critics showed up too. They tried to spin it. They called her emotional, angry, disrespectful, whatever words they could find, to try to soften the impact of what she said. But even they didn't try to deny the power behind her words. Because they couldn't. She had said it all loud, clear, and with no apologies. But this moment wasn't just about a fiery exchange. It wasn't just a clip for social media. It mattered because it pulled back the curtain on how broken things really are. It showed what happens when someone refuses to play the game and instead uses their voice to shake the system. Crockett didn't just react, she exposed the routine. She showed how hearings get used as political theater. How the same voices always get to speak while others get talked over. How truth can get twisted, and how that's treated like strategy, not shame. That's why it mattered. Because it wasn't just about one person. It was about a system that needed to be called out, and she did. There was also a deeper message in all of it. One that too often gets lost. Free speech shouldn't only belong to the powerful. And truth doesn't need a permission slip. Crockett didn't need to ask anyone for the right to speak. She took that space because it was hers to begin with. And she reminded everyone watching that, when you're in the room, you don't have to wait to be allowed to talk. You talk, you stand, you speak for the people who can't be in that room with you. This moment reminded people that politics isn't a show. It's not just arguments, hashtags, and votes. It's real. It affects real people's lives every single day. The laws passed or not passed shape how people live, work, and survive. That hearing wasn't just about Pam Bondi or Jasmine Crockett. It was about the future. About what kind of country we're building, and who gets to help shape it. Crockett didn't just claim her place. She made space for others to see themselves in power. As things slowly returned to business as usual, Crockett's words kept echoing. Because this wasn't an ending. It was a spark, a reminder. That the mic isn't just for decoration. That silence helps no one. That when you have a voice, you use it not just for yourself, but for everyone who's been pushed aside. This isn't the end, she said. And she was right. It's just one moment in a much bigger fight. So if you're watching, if you're listening, don't let it stop there. Stay aware, stay involved. Speak up when it matters. And never let the mic fall silent again.